Welcome to the latest edition of First State Kopites podcast. Today we're delighted to be joined by Peter Hooton, who has worn many hats in his life. What have we got here? Musician, author, activist, and now you're doing something with the Beatles, which I'm sure we'll get on to talk about. Just before we get going, if you're listening to this on Spotify, or what's that other platform, Sean? The other podcast platform?
Anchor?
Just Pocket Casts.
Pocket Casts, yes.
Well, it's just an app you can access the podcast from. But
make sure you subscribe, and we'll also have it up later on the YouTube channel. So subscribe there as well. So without further ado, Peter, welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
Good to have you.
Good to be on it. It's great to see all the smiling faces. In the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah. Well, this has been actually it's interesting. It's been quite a big source of distraction for us in a positive way. It's given us something to focus on.
I mean, the good thing about it is interaction on the internet, isn't it? Without the internet, I think we'd all be a little bit more depressed, but the fact that we can watch the matches at home and I think the worst aspect about this is that you get loads of people on the internet playing the guitar and singing, which I don't really go in for, unless the only one I've enjoyed really is Madness, British group Madness.
Yeah.
They did one in a proper recording studio, and it was absolutely fantastic, but most of the other ones I haven't really been interested in, and the farm aren't going to do that,
Yeah. So you've not set up a Zoom call with the band to kind of...
No, we all hate each other.
let's get on to that. But being a Liverpool podcast, we do want to start with your earliest memories of the football team.
Earliest memories was going to me nan's house, which was right near the ground,
Yeah.
And so my dad had a season ticket. So this would have been the early 60s, mid-60s. So I used to go, when he'd park by my nan's, and then he'd go to the match, and I'd stay in my nan's, and then at the end of the time, 3/4 time or whatever, I'd walk down onto Oakfield Road, where the cop is, Oakfield Road, and then walk towards the ground, and I'd always meet him coming out, That was my earliest memories of the match, and now, I probably would have been about 4 or 5, so I wasn't with an adult, so it never happened nowadays, but those things used to happen in those days, so I'd see him coming from the match, and then we'd, then I progressed to go into the match, I remember my granddad took me to one of my first matches, but it was a reserve game, and in those days, the reserves used to play at Anfield, so if you had a season ticket, you could get into the reserve games for free. So my granddad took me to a reserve game. And I always remember it because there was no one else on the ground. I was thinking, where is everyone? I had no concept of first team and reserves, And he sat me on a crash barrier and was talking to someone. And I fell off the crash barrier and split my head open. So that's why I can remember it, Wow. A painful experience.
Wow. so hopefully that was the worst of your experiences inside Anfield.
Probably the worst, yeah.
So what's your first memory of kind of watching the first team, seeing the big lads play?
Well, my dad took me to the games, but because he had a season ticket in the Kemlyn Road, which became the Centenary, is now the Sir Kenny Dalglish stand. He had a season ticket there, but he used to work with someone called Ray Shelley. And Ray Shelley's dad was an old trainer called Albert Shelley. And Albert Shelley is one of these people who wasn't employed by the club anymore, but just used to hang around and fix boots and paint walls and things, He was the odd job man, basically. So sometimes my dad would get tickets for the obstructed view in the main stand. And the obstructed view in the main stand was right next to the cop and the boys' pen. So sometimes I went in there with my dad. I can't really remember many of the games, He said he took me to a game where Gary Sprake threw it into his own net. It was only a youngster, and then Tony Hateley scored a hat-trick against Newcastle. But I can't really remember those games. The only games I started remembering was early 70s, really, properly.
Yeah.
So Shankly's first great team, he did take me to the match, but I wouldn't be able to tell you anything about them. You know, all I remember was noise coming from the Kop, obviously.
Yeah.
And the boys' pen was right next to us. And because we had an obstructed view, there was no one else there because those were the seats they couldn't sell. There was a big stanchion in front of you. So we just used to get pelted all through the game by the boys' pen, throwing things at us. Because they thought we were posh because we were in the seats. But it was because my dad knew Ray Shelley, whose dad was Albert Shelley. He got a few tickets now and again, you know.
That's awesome. It was 6-0 that game with the Hateley hat.
Was it? Yeah.
I remember it well because I was not allowed to go.
All right, yeah. Do you remember it? Yeah.
I remember the Liverpool Echo headline.
Yeah.
It was more about not being able to go. So.
Yeah. But in those days, of course, believe it or not, Everton were the big team, you know. Shankly's first big team, and but you know, Everton was still 69-70 when we were at school. You know, everyone's called a school of science and that.
Yeah.
And then when I was walking to my nan's when Liverpool were playing away, I'd because my dad wouldn't be going to my nan's, I'd be walking there on a Saturday. I used to go past Goodison and see all coaches parked outside Priory Road next to Stanley Park.
Yeah. And
they used to have 30 to 40 coaches, you know, all lined up. And then when Liverpool played at home, we had about 2 or 3. And I always used to think to myself, one day we might be as big as them, you know. I mean, the irony of that. I said that on a radio show a few weeks ago, after we won the league, you know, and Evertonians were going ballistic, you know, but it's the reality. That's what it was. It wasn't really till Shankly's second great team, the one that won the league 72-73, I started going regularly on my own with my mates. And then Liverpool started going on this ascendancy, really, you know, and totally dwarfing Everton, you know.
Yeah. Everton, we could go off on a big tangent with them, couldn't we? I think we've had a few people on who've talked about, like, if you'd have started supporting a team at the beginning of the 60s from Liverpool, it probably wouldn't have been Liverpool.
No, but I mean, obviously, we were getting great crowds still. This is what my dad always says, and when I researched the book, which you might mention later, the Boot Room Boys,
yep.
Looking at the crowds, Liverpool was still getting fantastic crowds. Yeah. They were still getting in the second division, which is now the Championship, you know. But they were still getting 40-odd thousand, bigger games, 50-odd thousand. So I don't think the club, everyone was quite happy with that. I think at the club, the directors and everyone, you know, it needed someone with vision to come in and a force of personality, and that was Bill Shankly. He was a whirlwind. I don't think they realised what they were getting when they got Shankly. He transformed the club from top to bottom, you know.
Absolutely. So if you think about kind of your favourite Shankly memory, what would that be?
It was probably 72-73 when we won the league. Yeah. Obviously we lost the cup the year before, and we just narrowly lost out in the league. But 72-73, I remember queuing up to get in the Kop dead early. And I eventually got in. It was a massive crowd outside. I eventually got in and went to my normal spec. And my normal spec in the Kop was more of the same area to go in now, you know. But it was 2/3 of the way up with the Kop. But 2/3 of the way up the Kop, there was like a walkway. It wasn't total terrace. There was a walkway. And the first bar down from the walkway, we sat on that as kids because, you know, we were too small to see. So we sat on that bar. But when we won the league in 72-73, it was 0-0 against Leicester, I think. And it wasn't a very good game, but we won the league. Shankly came out, and it took him about half an hour to do the lap of honour. There's so many kids on the pitch, you know, trying to grab him. And I've never experienced anything before or since of pure adulation. It was incredible, and you can still get the footage on YouTube, you know, of him walking around, you know, yeah. And everyone singing Shankly to the Amazing Grace tune. And it was like, I was thinking to myself, even then as a kid, you know, this is the Messiah. This is like, you know, I've been brought up Roman Catholic, you know, and I was indoctrinated to the age of 7. But by 7, I'd rejected it all. And it was Shankly that I was only interested in what Shankly had to say, you know. He was our king. Yeah. And so I think that moment, I also doorstepped him about 1981, just before he died, you know, and I went to, someone told me where he lived in Belfield, which is near Everton's training ground, and I doorstepped him because I was a youth worker by then. And I wanted him to give out medals for the competition, you know. And he came to the door, and he was great, and he was, you know, I was like in the presence of, you know, I was tongue-tied. I've never been tongue-tied in my life. I just didn't know, like, you know, when you feel the presence of someone who's so famous, you know. But I felt, a reason I doorstepped him, I was a bit embarrassed to do it really, but I think at the time, he was, you know, he didn't have much to do, you know. Yeah. He wasn't really employed as anything, you know. He had the odd thing on the television, and he did Radio City, which is a local radio station. He did something on there, but, you know, I met him, and, you know, I was just in awe, just in total awe of him.
There is a story that he kept showing up at Melwood, right? And they tell him he wasn't welcome. Well, it wasn't. I think it was a very difficult period for the club because he decided to retire, but he'd always threatened to do that every year, you know. And then they thought, oh well, after a couple of weeks, he'll say, I've made a big mistake again, I'm coming back. But after a few weeks, they just left and thought, well, he's not coming back, and they were adamant, and he wanted to do the press conference. And he did the press conference, and he always says, doesn't he? He felt like he was going to the electric chair, you know. It's like really emotional time for him. But unfortunately, you know, what happened is they asked Bob Paisley he asked Bill first if he'd come back, and he refused. So they asked Bob Paisley, you know. And I always remember my dad, I was having my cornflakes ready to go to school. And I said, what do you think of Bob Paisley, Dad? And he went, he won't do anything. He hasn't got the personality. So I always remind him of that. He's still alive, my dad, you know. And he's still a season ticket over there. I always remind him of that when he's predicting the future here, you know. That's great. Yeah, so it felt so I remember distinctly, like, what a sad day. It felt like it was the end. Like, how can we possibly, you know, kind of repeat what we've been doing?
It was a really traumatic day, and, you know, when he retired, and people couldn't believe it, and thinking, what are we going to do? This could be the end of the club, you know. And then Bob reluctantly took the job, and then Bill was turning up in his tracksuit at the training session. So I don't think it was, and everyone was still calling Bill the boss. And I think the club had looked to what had happened to Man United, because Matt Busby was still very much a presence with Manchester United. And when they had new managers, everyone still called Matt Busby the boss, you know. I think they'd seen their demise going down to the second division. Yeah. And they thought, we don't want that to happen at Liverpool. So they were in I don't think they handled it well. There's no doubt they handled it badly, but there was not much they could do, really. They were saying, Bill, you know, it's best if you don't turn up. And I think he felt the cold shoulder, but then he should have embraced him in other ways by, you know, inviting him to go to the match. He actually came to a match, I think it was against Coventry. Soon after he'd retired, mid-70s, and he was in the Kop. And the rumour went around the Kop, Shankly's in the Kop. But no one could see him because you couldn't really see over their heads, you know. But then there's a photograph of him in the Kop, you know, when he was in the Kop. And he said he did that. I think that was a bit of a way of saying to the club, I'm one of these, really. I'm not one of you. Yeah. I'm not the hierarchy. These are my people, you know. So I think he was when I spoke to him on the doorstep, you could see he was a bit disillusioned, you know. And but I think it's a case of, you know, how would you feel? You've built the club up from nothing, and then Paisley takes it to another level, winning the European Cup, you know. so human emotion. You know, he must have been really not upset by Liverpool's success, but very in two minds really. I think thinking, there was a few things happened. Liverpool played Bruges '76, and he wanted to go, but the club didn't invite him. But then Radio City were going to take him, and then Radio City got in touch with the club, and they said, "Oh yeah, we can get him accommodation." But they put him in the hotel with the players' wives, and I think that killed him, because he thought, "This is what they've done to me," man. It was badly handled, no doubt about that. But that's hierarchies of the club can be like that, can't they?
Yeah, you kind of feel like the modern hierarchy would be much too. I kind of say this and then think of some of the things they've done, but you kind of think they would be much better at managing that situation.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously they've made some mistakes, but I think in the modern era, I don't think they would have done it. I think Shankly, he wanted to be, I think, invited to things rather than ringing them up saying, "Can I have tickets for this match?" Or and really that's a bad way of handling it, and we're reminded of it constantly,
Yeah, absolutely. So moving forward then through the 70s, 80s, I read quite a bit about the stuff that you've done with kind of fashion and kind of being part of the away crowd. So I did the post at which you were described as the iconic Liverpudlian.
Yeah. No, I did a magazine called The End.
Yeah.
Which was like a fanzine, and it was called the Football Fanzine, but it wasn't a football fanzine really. I just wanted it to appeal to people who went to football matches, Yeah. So that's where I think it's a bit of a miss. I wouldn't have put myself down. I was interested in what terrace styles. I was interested in terrace chants. I was interested in everything about the culture of going to football, but I wouldn't see myself as a fashion icon.
I would say I did. I was reading about The End, and it was talking about how you would do an in and out section.
Oh yeah.
You would just look and see what you saw, and then say that was out of fashion just to screw with people. So
The idea was anything that became popular on the terraces, say, we'd immediately put into the out column. It was a piss take on fashion magazines. It would always say what's going to be next season's colour, or what's next season, and just ridiculous concepts. So the ins and outs became, it had a life of its own, really. So we used to confuse people so much because sometimes we put something in the in column and the out column, just to. It's basically world politics now. It's chaos and confusion, so no one knows what's going on.
Well, this could take a nasty turn.
I was going to ask about, I'd read and seen some stuff about how when the club would travel to Europe, they'd try to bring memorabilia back almost to show, that we're in Europe and you're not, and we got this in Europe, kind of thing. So I don't know if you can speak to that, like what that was all about.
There was a lot of people were going to Europe, so there were new destinations. There was something called Transalpino in those days, which was a student rail card for Europe. But streetwise Liverpudlians knew that you could, if you put Transalpino, Liverpool to London, you could easily rub it out and put Liverpool to Munich, and that's the way it was done. So people were going all around Europe using the wits, and obviously a lot of fashions came from there, in terms of sport. Nowadays, it's sports gear is available everywhere, in every shopping place, every online, everything. But in those days, like training shoes and that were only worn for tennis. They were only worn at tennis. It was Liverpool and Everton fans, to be fair, who started wearing them at football matches, And it was a fashion that was based upon what the cool kids were wearing, So there was the look in those days, late 70s, was like a very effeminate fringe, almost like a Beatles fringe from the 60s, but over one eye almost. It was called a wedge haircut, People had cagoules on, People had straight jeans, training shoes. So it was an image, you know, in other towns you go to, people still had wide trousers and, you know, budgie collars, you know, and there was a certain look, and that's what it was all about, really. But going to Europe obviously broadened Liverpool fans' horizons, you know. Mm-hmm. And that became, because of mass unemployment in Liverpool, a lot of people using the wits about them and going to Europe and seeing what they could pick up, what they could bring back to sell. And there was a shop called Wade Smith in Liverpool who made a fortune doing this because he learned from lads on the street what was happening. He worked in a place called Topshop in Church Street, but they had an Adidas franchise. And he had the Adidas franchise. So there was a shop in Oxford Street in London who had Forest Hills training shoe, Adidas famous training shoe now, but in those days it was like not many people had heard of it, you know. And they couldn't sell them in Oxford Street because they were £35 or whatever. In modern money, that'd probably be £100 or whatever. And he couldn't sell them in Oxford Street. So he said, "Oh, give them to me in Liverpool." And he said, "Oh, they won't buy them in Liverpool. There's loads more money in London than Liverpool." And he went within a few days. And then he realised then something's happening. So he built an empire. He started a shop off in a small side street in Liverpool. And within 10, 15 years, it was a massive organisation with shops all around the UK. But he did a documentary a few years ago with me. And he talked about the phenomenon in Liverpool, what was happening. He said, Liverpool, his shop in a small street in Liverpool was outselling London 10-1, the whole of London, for Adidas. We call it Adidas, some people call it Adidas, I don't know what you call it in the States, but outselling the whole of New York, outselling the whole of Los Angeles, and he knew the figures, you see. He said for 18 months on the run, his shop was the best-selling shop in the world. He said the nearest competitor was Manchester. Not just one shop in Manchester, the whole of Manchester.
Wow.
He sold 3 times as many as Manchester, 10 times as many as the whole of London, you know. And if you think about it, New York, he was selling more than New York, selling more than the whole cities, because this phenomenon was going on the grassroots level, you know. And it's an amazing story, really. And Wade Smith went over to Germany, basically, and went to dead stock warehouses and said, "I'll have 100 pair of them, 200 pair of them." And they were going, "Why? What, is tennis popular in Liverpool?" And because they couldn't understand, because it wasn't a fashion item then. It wasn't like now. Yeah. So he said he went over with, you know, wads of Deutschmarks, and he said, "How are you going to pay for this?" He said, I've got all the Deutschmarks in." He said, "You want all this in cash?" He couldn't believe it, you know. And Wade Smith, Robert Wade Smith, his name was, he wasn't a criminal or anything. He basically was a buyer for Topshop in Liverpool, but he'd seen what was going on. My mate, actually, who I had a flat with in the early 80s, he was onto it as well, and he was trying to do it. He had he sold to about 5 or 6 shops around the northwest, but he could never get that big break where he could go and buy 500 pair in Europe. He was always buying 50s and 20s, you know. But he recognised it because, you know, it was so obvious it was going on, you know. And then people were coming back from Europe with, remember strap over training shoes with the Velcro? Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, you know, this lad walked in the pub with a pair of these on. No one had seen anything like it. It's like he was from Star Wars or something. Where did you get them from? Switzerland, you know, and that was, you know, and then they became a big, you know, so it was happening every few weeks, different, you know, training shoe really, and then different brands as well, you know.
Now, Wade Smith was near where the White Star is, right? That's the big store.
That was when he became massive, yeah. So it was down by Matthew Street, yeah. But his original shop was just off Bold Street, in a place called Slater Street, which has now just got a few bars on. But when he had the shop, it was just disused warehouses, you know. There wasn't much going on there, you know. But people would make a pilgrimage from all around the country to go there, you know. And that's how we got to know. The End was read by a lot of people from around the country, you know. And the number of people that I come across now say, "Oh, The End influenced me to write." because we were just trying to get, now everyone writes, don't they, on Facebook and Twitter. But in those days, it was a bit of an effort, wasn't it? You had to write something down, get it typed up, get it printed or stenciled and that, and then, you know, get it distributed. You know, now anyone can write any old shit on fucking Facebook, as we've all seen.
Yes.
And they do, yeah.
But there was a magazine in London called Boys Home, which was responsible for a lot of the house music in London in the late 80s. And they said they were influenced by The End. They were Chelsea fans. He said we could never do The End because ours was a bit like left-leaning, maybe. You know, I mean, we didn't have much politics in it, but if we did have, we had, you know, people talking about, you know, the community or whatever, you know. But they said we could never do that at Chelsea because, you know, they wouldn't accept it. Different type of clientele who went to match, you know. But what they did do is more based upon music and nightclubs and that, you know. So, and they become a massive organisation in London, you know, at their parties. In the acid house craze were legendary, you know. They were the coolest parties London has had before or since, you know.
That's cool. So I guess we're drifting into music, right?
Yeah, sort of.
I've been a fan for a long time. It turns out now we're counting the years. But tell us a little bit about the origin of the farm and kind of what they've been doing. I guess, you know.
Well, we were. I wanted to be a footballer, you know, like everyone.
Yeah.
You want to be a footballer, don't you? And like, I decided, you know, I was doing The End. People, and like, I was doing The End with a few mates, and we were all having we weren't making much money out of it. We could have gone commercial. We had lots of people trying to get us to go commercial, but we thought we can't write what we're writing. If we go commercial, everyone will be suing us, you know. There'd be local DJs who'd have us in court, you know. So anyway, this was going along. And I was always thinking, you know, I always wanted to be in a band, but I'd never really pursued it properly. I'd never gone into music shops and answered adverts or anything. But then one day, I was in a pub, and believe it or not, in those days, the pub shut on a Sunday afternoon because of the First World War. They did some licensing in England, still in the 1980s, was based upon 1914-18 war, because they shut pubs at certain times. Pubs would shut at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and open again at 5, because they wanted people to go back to the factories or whatever. I don't know what it was, and on a Sunday they'd be shut from 2 in the afternoon till 5 or whatever, a bit longer. So I was staying with my mates this one night, and I heard some music, and I said to my mate, I said, "What's that?" He said, "Oh, that's our kid. He's got a band." So we went in to listen to them into the bar area where they were rehearsing. And I said, "Well, have you got a singer?" And he said, "Oh no, we haven't got one." I said, "Well, I'll have a go." And that's how it started. You know? It was like literally like that. I would never have answered an advert and gone for an audition ever, you know. And there was about 4 people in the rehearsal. 2 of them were what we called in Liverpool trogs. So they had long hair, and they were into progressive music, you know. And 2 were like into pop music, you know. So the 2 who were into pop music liked me, but because I did The End, and we were a bit what they call, you know, there was a term for it in Liverpool in those days called scally, which was like a bit of a ne'er-do-well or whatever, you know. But we saw it as a cheeky Liverpudlian, you know. But they must have looked at my short hair and thought, no, he's not for us, you know, we want someone like Bono or something. So the 2 that liked me said, we'll start a new band, you know. So they started a band with me in it. And gradually over the year, over about 6 months, I said, I can't sing these lyrics. They were other people's lyrics, you see. Yeah. And it was all lovey-dovey stuff, you know, say you love me. And they weren't bad, but I was obsessed with the Clash and the Specials and the Jam. So I wanted lyrics that were representing social awareness, you know, what was going on in society. So I wanted that. I didn't want to be singing about Say You Love Me, you know. And so the lad who wrote the songs, he went, yeah, well, if you want to have a go. Have a go, yeah. So that's how I started writing, you know. And I think it was all due to the confidence I was given by writing the end. Because I was able to write the end, and you see people in pubs reading it and laughing. And, you know, even at the match, reading it and laughing, I thought, you know, it gave me more self-confidence, because I tried to write at school, but because I was playing football at school, I was like captain of the footy team or whatever. You're not supposed to write poetry, are you? You're supposed to be, you know. So the English teacher one day at creative writing said, do some creative writing, and that's why I wrote this poem. And the fella next to you had to mark it and give a description. He said, this poem is verging on idiocy. And the teacher read it out, and he read it out because he run the cross-country team, and I didn't want to do cross-country, and he wanted me in his team. I said, no, I'm playing football. And there was a big argument over it, you know, and I chose football, and I refused to do cross-country. I hated cross-country. If you ever want to watch a film, Loneliness of a Long-Distance Runner, a black and white film from Britain, and it's a brilliant film about Borstals, which were like detention centres in the 50s and 60s. And this lad, the main character in it, stopped. He's winning the race, but he stopped because he hated the people who were running Borstal, and they all wanted to win against these other Borstal. He just stops on the finishing line and folds his arms. It's a brilliant film, you know, and that's what I wanted to do to our English teacher. But when he read that out, it really knocked me confidence, you know, because everyone was laughing in the class. It was written a poem, you know, and so it put me off. And it wasn't really until John Lennon was made that I started writing again, you know, because I was so upset. Thought it was the end of the world, you know. I was so upset, I started writing my thoughts down. You know.
And that resulted, in my mind, in some really kind of great songs. That the one I'm surprised hasn't got kind of trotted out more recently is you had a single called Love See No Colour.
Oh, yeah.
Which I actually had a T-shirt of, and I was in Los Angeles just after the Rodney King riots, and I have this distinct memory of this Latino man giving me the 2 thumbs up wearing the T-shirt.
Well, we did the video in New York.
Wow, okay.
But I got the idea from Los Angeles, from Venice Beach. We were doing something, we were touring, and saw this, it was a Rastafarian selling Love See No Colour T-shirts. I thought, what a great statement, you know, so I wrote a song around it. And then when we went to do the video, it was in New York, and it was the time Mick Jones was on tour with us, so Joe Strummer was there in the hotel. And it's a funny story, this, because Joe Strummer had replaced, Joe Strummer from The Clash had replaced Shane MacGowan from the Pogues as lead singer of the Pogues, because Shane MacGowan he'd had a health problem, you know. Now, that was 1991, 92 or whatever. And you're thinking, if you're going to put bets on who's going to live longer than who, it's going to be Strummer's going to live longer than Shane MacGowan. You know, he's took his place in the Pogues for that tour of America. But anyway, he came to the hotel room and he said, oh, you know, you're doing the video tomorrow, aren't you? Yeah. He said, have you got a pair of Ray-Bans? And I said, no, I haven't got any with me. He went, yeah, you can have mine. And he gave me this pair of Ray-Bans. So I thought, brilliant, Joe Strummer's giving me his Ray-Bans, you know, for the video. He said, you got to have it in New York. You've got to have Ray-Bans for your video, you know. Anyway, a few years later, I went to get them fixed. I went to the opticians and he started looking at them and saying, why do you want these fixed? It's all sentimental value, you know. I want just put a screw in the, you know, screw would come out. And he said, well, why do you want these fixed? I said, well, it's sentimental value. I got off someone who's no longer with us, and, you know, I loved them and that, you know. And he said, they're fakes. They got them in a mix with the $5 fakes, you know. Oh my God, Joe.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, terrific. So you had a question about Spirits of Shankly, right, Sean? You were going to ask.
Yeah, I mean, I just, from the bit I was able to read about you, I understand that you're pretty involved. Were you involved in the founding of Spirit of Shankly? Are you still actively involved?
Yeah, I'm still on the committee, and I was involved in the founding of it, yeah, because basically because of what was happening with Hicks and Gillette, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We were getting tipped off by journalists, you see, and because I had fairly good contacts with journalists, we were getting tipped off about what was really going on at the club, you know. So then we decided, all over the internet, people were saying, we've got to have a meeting, you know. So all over the internet, people were saying, where can we have this meeting? And we decided the Sandon pub, which was the original training, changing room for Liverpool and previously Everton, when Everton played at Anfield, would be the location because it's the spiritual home of the birthplace of the club, you know. So we had the meeting there, but there was lots of people all over the internet. We thought we've got to invite everyone who does the away match coaches, people who go with the coaches on away matches, everyone who organises them, everyone who's got an internet podcast or a website or whatever, or runs something, you know. So we tried to make it a cross-section of support, you know. Mm-hmm. And everyone was saying, this is going to be chaos. And I rung up a mate I knew. He's no longer with us now, but his name was Paul Rice. And he'd been involved in politics in the past, and he was a brilliant chair. He was an absolutely fantastic chair. And I thought, if anyone can do it, he can do it. So I rang him up, and he was head of Liverpool's business community at the time. Mm-hmm. So he'd moved on from politics, but he was running Liverpool City Centre Business District as an organiser, you know, for like getting rates in off companies and all that. And he said, Peter, yeah, he said, I'll do this one meeting for you. He said, but, you know, I'm too busy in my other job. Anyway, 2 years later, there's a photograph on St. George's Hall. Can you see that?
A little
yes.
bit.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there he is, Paul Rice. So 2 years later, and on that day, that was Independence Rally in 2010, July the 4th, we declared independence from the American owners, you know. Mm-hmm. And Paul Rice made a speech on the steps where Shankly had made his great speeches. It was all symbolic, you know. And he made a brilliant speech. It was a Gettysburg speech, you know. It was an unbelievable speech about how, you know, fans were more important than, you know, any ownership, and, you know, they're just, you know, temporary custodians of it, you know, and they'll move on. And it was an unbelievable speech. Unfortunately, he didn't know he was ill then, but a few weeks later he started feeling tired, and he had the first stages of blood cancer. Yeah. So he lasted for another 18 months maybe, you know. But, you know, he was a brilliant character, and for him he kept it together. He kept the organisation together, and his insight really, I'd say, was more important than anyone's in the organisation. We had so many people coming in with mad ideas, you know, and you know what it's like. It was like we were almost on a war footing every day, you know. It's like, what can we do to stop Hicks and Gillette, you know? And everywhere they went, you know, we were trying to stop them getting in the ground. You know, we found out they were in a hotel in Liverpool City Centre. The hotel had been surrounded, you know. It was real. But one of the main things was the internet. And somebody spotted Hicks in Wall Street trying to get a loan off someone to carry on the ownership, buy out Gillette, you know. And that's the power of the international Liverpool supporters, because somebody saw him, took a photograph of him walking into this investment bank, and within minutes it was all around the world. And this investment bank must have went, oh, you know, these guys that wanted to boycott that Sun newspaper, you know, they probably thought this is serious. And we brought down the Premier League website one day. Scoot Moore was in charge at the time. Because they were getting bombarded with emails, the Premier League website crashed. It's never happened before or since, you know. It's just the pure volume of Liverpool fans from all around the world bombarding them, you know. So I think, you know, I'm proud of what the Spirits of Shankly did, but we never really had, I'd say we only ever had 5-10% of the support of the fans, you know, in the ground, you know. Everyone now, you can't meet anyone now who wasn't right behind us, you know, but a lot of people at the time saying, oh, get behind the team, support the team. I said, if this carries on, you won't have a team.
Yeah.
You know, there was a lot of arguments, and we had big demonstrations before the Man United game, about 2008, I think it was, or 2009. I think before both games, actually, it was. We'd have 5,000 people on it. It was like a proper march with banners, and the banners looked fantastic. You know, it was like it looked like a medieval battle scene. You know, some of it, you know, all these people coming into El Cid or something, you know. And that was symbolic. So it was great for news media and like photographs, you know. But really, we wanted, you know, in the ground after the matches, we didn't want to disrupt the matches because we would have got turned on by the rest of the crowd. So we decided to do it after matches, and there was only ever 5,000 people. The other 40-odd thousand went home, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
I was going to say, it's easy in hindsight to know who was on the side of right, but I do recall John Gibbons told us on one, I don't sure it was one of the podcasts, that he was particularly annoyed by the fact that he was on one of the marches and there were people at the cabbage clapping, and it's like, it's like this is a thing to participate in, not a.
No, it was bizarre. I mean, some people did join the march, but as you say, a lot of people were just clapping and going thumbs up, you know. But I mean, I think it was. I think they took over the club around about the time of the financial crash, didn't they? So they were on the road to nowhere, as the talking heads sang. You know, they were going nowhere, and the whole structure of their deal being set up that meant they couldn't do it. It was impossible. And at the time, of course, you know, Benitez in charge. And we'd been to 2 European Cup finals in 3 years, and it looked like we were in the ascendancy. Looked like we were going to win the league 2008, 2009, which we nearly did. But it all came crashing down, didn't it?
Did. Yeah, I got a lot more engaged in the club at that time for that reason. It's just a lot of it was just because it just felt wrong what was happening. You had this great manager and great squad, and it was falling apart because the owners were lying to everyone.
Yeah. I mean, I think Gillette was like, he was almost like a comedy figure, only Gillette, but Hicks was like a proper con man, wasn't he? He was like, he was proper, you know, funded various political institutions. And he'd been to Brazil before, hadn't he? And like messed up a team in Brazil. But he reminded me, and he always reminded me of John Wayne. You know, he could have been in a John Wayne movie.
Was he an oil man? He was a Texas guy. Was he an oil guy?
Yeah. I don't know. He owned the Texas Rangers, and the year he owned the Texas Rangers, he was voted the worst owner in Major League Baseball. I do know that.
Yeah. Well, you know, in business, you can get away with things like that because you just move on to other stocks and shares, don't you? But not running a football club. And I think he was sat there because there's so much anti-Hicks and Gillette propaganda around. He did that thing in front of the telly with his Liverpool mug, didn't he? And the fire in the background and on his Texas ranch, you know. And everyone just, you can't do that in Liverpool. You just can't do that. You know, everyone just sees right through that, you know. And he's got a great future in politics if he ever goes into politics.
Oh, yeah, there's another tangent we could take, right? I'm sure he'd have been happy to be called an iconic Liverpudlian, by the way, just saying.
Yeah. But he had his son, didn't he? And his son was like Liverpool based. But his son was going around but he was based in London, I think, his son, in a hotel, just boasting about various things, about what he was doing, what he was up to. You know, you just think, you can't get away with that. He came to Sandon once. Someone just swilled him with a pint of beer, you know, and he just got off with his bodyguards, you know. But I think he'd come to, you know, to sort of like try and find out what people really wanted, you know. But he was just so over the top. You know, he was like, you know, he's one of those people who just boasting about everything he did, boasting about how much money he had. You know, you just couldn't. You can't do that. You can't do that.
Mm-hmm. Was he the one who got in like the email fight? Was it email or text fight with someone?
I think so. Yeah. That was another fellow called Cheng, was it? Or, yeah.
I can't remember. It's in the Brian. I think it's a Brian Reed book. It talks about.
Yeah. They all blend into one. They all blend into one Thunderbird baddie, don't we?
It was all bad. So let's move on to and talk about your book. Published, I think, beginning of last year, The Boot Room Boy.
Yeah, end of 2018. It's still, you know, we're still selling well on Amazon. It's done well, you know, but it was about the unseen story of the boot room. So it was photographs that hadn't been in the public realm, really, you know. And I had to go down to Watford. So there's the Daily Mirror archive, which is probably the biggest selling paper on Merseyside in Liverpool because of the Sun boycott. Yeah. But it's more like the working class paper, you know. So I went down to the archive and tried to find photographs that I hadn't seen before, you know, and got them out. And ironically, the lad who was doing, the archivist was an Evertonian. And he was going into the archive saying, I'd say, come back with photographs of Emlyn Hughes or John Toshak and that, or Albert Shelley, you know, the trainer, and he'd come back with them. And they were all like grainy and, you know, sometimes they were just negatives, you know. And it's funny that I found that one of, you know, the new statue with Paisley carrying Emlyn Hughes. Yeah. I found that photograph in 2008 or 9 in the Watford archive, you know. But so when they had the unveiling and all that, and the Echo, Liverpool Echo, and Peter Moore was involved, there's big documentaries on it, but there was no mention of who found the photograph. It was me. But I mean, I wasn't bothered, but everyone was saying, oh, I've loved that photograph for years. No, you haven't. I only found it a few years ago. You know, it was literally gathering dust, you know. And I found quite a lot of them. I'd say 50% of the photographs in the Boot Room Boys hadn't been seen, but now they're everywhere because they've been published. Yeah. They're on websites now, and I'm forever getting sent photographs from people on Twitter and that saying, have you seen this one? And it's one of the ones that was in the book, you know. Like, got fed up of saying, oh yeah, you know.
It need an auto reply. It's like send them to Amazon.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. So what was the most astounding thing that you learned writing that book? I think you didn't know.
Well, probably why the demise of Liverpool happened. You know, and I think it can be boiled down to the 1986 summer of '86 when Chris Lawler was sacked as the reserve team manager, and Geoff Twentyman, who's the famous Liverpool scout, who'd been there since '67, and had got all the greats, you know, Clements, Hughes, Rush, everyone, you know. He was forced into retirement really with on health issues, you know. So Liverpool never replaced Geoff Twentyman, and I think I'm not just saying this because his son cuts my hair. But his son cuts my hair, and every time he's cut my hair, he's got a new story about what Geoff Twentyman went on to do. And he went on to scout for Glasgow Rangers, for Graham Souness, when he was the manager of Rangers. And that's when Rangers started doing well in Europe. So it's no coincidence, I don't think, because he was recommending players for Rangers, you know. I think Liverpool's recruitment started to go downhill. Jack Leach does cover it in his book. He devotes 3 or 4 pages to it, saying, you know, we never got rid of the boot room, he never did this, he never did that. But I think that was the beginning. I think Jack Leach was trying to modernise the club. The boot room was seen as the old men. You know, the old men who were drinking a bit of whiskey on sawdust, on beer barrels, you know. Yeah. So Shankly, Fagan, Paisley had come through it. You know, Roy Evans was still there. Chris Lawler was the reserve team manager. Ronnie Moran was still there. I think basically the one thing Dalglish said he wanted to do, what do you want when you become manager? He said, build me a bar in the manager's office. He said, because I want to invite the managers into the manager's office, because I want my wife and kids to come in, which the boot room wasn't the environment for them, you know.
Yeah.
So that was the big break, I think, from that sort of, we're all in this together, you know. I think that was the first time it was fractured since Shankly. Shankly had said, came up with a brilliant quote. Shankly said, all I want from you guys is loyalty. This is when he first arrived at Anfield. He said to Paisley, Paisley and Fagan, who were there, and a couple of others, all I want from you is loyalty. He said, if anyone comes to me with a story about another person, it's not the person the story's about. It's the person who comes with the story that gets the boot. And everyone went, oh yeah, loyalty. It's about loyalty, you know. Didn't want anyone snitching behind. So they had murder in the boot room over things. You know, it's well documented. They would be screaming at each other, you know. But it never went out those roars. It was the old, it was a murder. It was the old, you know, mafiosa group of men who were, it doesn't go to, we're not leaking this to the press, you know. So I think by the time Sooners come, that had gone, you know. And I think when Sooners arrived, I think Alan Hansen said to him, I don't know where you've come here. He said, this is the worst team I've played it, you know. It was already over because the recruitments had dipped. We were buying poor players, you know. We were buying Jimmy Carter from Millwall, you know, and he cost quite a bit of money and everyone was going, yeah. He wouldn't get in a Sunday League team by half. What's going on? Now, Twentyman would never authorised that signings. What Dalglish did, and I could have put this in the book, but I didn't want to put it in the. I didn't want to really. Because Ron Yeats is a Liverpool legend, but Ron Yeats got the job as chief scout, and he'd never scouted before in his life. Yeah. Never scouted, so he didn't have the connections that Geoff Twentyman had. Geoff Twentyman still had the connections, but he was giving them to Glasgow Rangers, and that's why they started doing well in Europe. You know.
Wow. So that
was a big revelation to me.
Yeah. Couple of things. Jimmy Carter, look him up. One for the kids. Yeah. Some Man United fan lives in our neighbourhood, just one. And the first thing he said to me when I met him, and he knew I was a Liverpool fan, was like, "Oh, you make some terrible signings, Jimmy Carter." And it's like, for 25 years, what? Honestly,
it's legendary. It's legendary. Because when he came on the pitch, it was going, "What's going on? Yeah. What is going on?" It was that obvious, you know, yeah. Just totally out of his depth, and you know. I mean, obviously, Dalglish's team of 87, 88 was absolutely fantastic, you know. Yeah. But Twentyman was the one who recommended, you know, Barnes and Paisley, and he'd recommended them, you know. Even though he wasn't officially employed by the club, he'd recommended them to people, you know, he sussed them out. Because what Twentyman used to do, and what Shankly asked him to do, he said, well, get me players, Geoff, with a northern soul. And that meant everything. That means in the UK, means someone who's probably had it a little bit harder, you know. So the likes of Keegan, from a mining family, you know. The likes of Ray Kennedy, similar. All those players, they had it. So, but what we started doing then is buying players from down south, you know, who were like, didn't have that like hunger almost, you know. And what Shankly was saying to Geoff Twentyman was like, buy players with a heart who'll kill for the club. And we ended up with Ruddock, Julian Dix. You know, this is a nightmare to me. I have nightmares about these people, you know. You know, it's just, yeah. I couldn't believe these players were getting bored because you support Liverpool. You know, you tended to keep your mouth shut. But, you know, I was at Anfield and people got saying by me, oh, he's got a sweet left foot, that Neil Ruddock, hasn't he? was going, are you mad? You just boot the ball up, and 1 in 3 foul out will predict where he's booting it to.
Yeah.
I was doing, this is how obsessed I was with Ruddock. I was doing up to index. You know what up to index are for the Premier League, yeah. Passes and all. I was doing that before the Premier League, doing it, just to prove that Ruddock was shit.
That's great.
He should never have played for Liverpool, I don't think. Julian Dick shouldn't have played for Liverpool. There's a few players who shouldn't have played for Liverpool, and they were, they weren't players with the Northern soul. There's a rumour about Ruddock, and I think it's in his book, that he had a £1 coin. Do you know this rumour?
No. He
had a £1 coin, and he'd take it onto the pitch, and you could pass it to a Liverpool player in line-up, say corners or free kicks. And if you got close enough to pass it to them, they had to take it. Whoever was left with the coin at the end of the match had to get the ailing. That's what was going on at Liverpool Football Club. Yeah. That's what was going on. Yeah. And I a lot of people say, "Oh, Ruddock, he's on the circuit now, isn't he? After dinner speaking and all that." But I've got his boots in our garage there. I've got his boots from the Ian Rush testimonial. Where Sammy Lee gave me his boots to play in a match before the main testimonial game. And he only takes size 8. I take 9.5. They cripple me. So that's another reason I can't stand Ruddock.
I remember being in I don't know, was it 93, 94 away at Norwich, who just sold, I think, their best player to Spurs. Yeah. And it ended up 2-2. And Ruddock made a mistake and Dix made a mistake. And it was it's a long way back from Norwich, a long way to think about how poor they were and how they should not have been in our team.
You see, also going on to the team, the so-called Spice Boys team, they were a fantastic team. Mm-hmm. Roy Evans, fantastic footballing team. But you'd had people like Redknapp, who didn't have a northern soul, if you know what I mean. Yeah. It's hard to describe. So, there'd be something similar in the States. I don't know what it would be, but that he was too soft. He was a decent player. He was too soft. He wasn't, he wasn't a Van Dijk. You can tell Van Dijk is a winner. He will win at all costs. Even though he's the coolest player on the pitch, you can tell there's an inner anger that he's got to win the game, And we had fantastic players under Roy Evans, but they didn't have that. They didn't have that granite in them. They didn't have that winning streak that United had with Roy Evans, with Roy Keane, and also Cantona. He transformed that club, and you know the story about Cantona, don't you?
Which one?
The one where Platini came into Graham Souness. We played Auxerre at Anfield. He knocked on Souness's door. He said, "There's a French kid here. He's got some disciplinary record, but he wants to play in the Premier League, and he loves Liverpool. He wants to play for Liverpool." And Souness took all the details and got back to Platini. He was the middleman, Platini. I don't think he was his agent. He was just speaking on behalf of him. And Souness passed on. Why did he pass on? Because of his disciplinary record. Can you believe that? Graham Souness, who used to knock people out on the pitch, talking about, his disciplinary record. But that could have transformed Liverpool's team from being the nice boys who play pretty football to being a winning team. It's decisions like that, which, and it's well documented. Souness admits it now. It's been in a few books, and he admits it happened. What happened then, Cantona went to Sheffield Wednesday on a trial. We played Auxerre, I think, November 1991. Cantona went for a trial with Sheffield Wednesday over the Christmas period. Because there was ice, the pitches were iced up, so they had to play indoors on an AstroTurf. Sheffield Wednesday, we were looking at him, thinking, should we sign him? We want to see it on grass, they said, before we sign it. In the meantime, Leeds had obviously scouts being tipped off, and they signed him without seeing him. They signed him like that. He went to Leeds. What did Leeds do? They win the league. under Howard Wilkinson, Cantona. And Cantona was, the reason he went to United was because of things that were going on in the dressing room, you know, with people's wives. That's why he had to go to United. So that's why he got sold at cut price, you know. And he transformed Leeds, transformed United. So he would have transformed Liverpool.
Wow. Wow.
Another great story.
It feels like we should fast forward because we'll kind of close it out with just kind of bring us up to, I guess it'd be interesting your perspective on kind of what you think about this current team and where their northern soul is.
The current team are absolutely fantastic, and they have got northern soul in abundance. You know, it's got, you know, and you talk about, and it's not about where you're born, or it's what your attitude is, what Shankly meant by that. You know, so it doesn't matter where you're born. You can see Thiago's got that. Van Dijk's got that. Robertson has got it in abundance. Robertson would be the perfect Shankly player. Shankly would have loved him. He's like a cross between Alec Lindsay and Emlyn Hughes, because he's got the sweet left foot like Alec Lindsay had, but he's got that fighting determination, you know. You can see Robertson, can't you, trying to invade England and, you know, with the Jacobite rebellion. He's there, isn't he? He's there with you know, he's there. I'd say
with the blue and white painted face, you could see it.
Yeah. That was William Wallace. That was a bit before, wasn't it? But yeah, it's the same. Yeah, the same principle. Trent, he's got that win streak in him, definitely. Henderson's got it, no doubt about it. Henderson's got it. He's got that mentality, you know. And you look to, you've got that in abundance in the midfield and defence, and then you've got the almost arrogance up front, isn't it? You know, and I think in terms of the powerhouse of the team in the defence and the midfield, it has got that winning streak, you know. Sometimes you think, and a lot of fans have looked at Salah and say, oh, he doesn't look because he's trying as much, you know, he's just a supremely gifted footballer. So everything to him is effortless. So you don't have to see him sweating cobs, do you? Because you know he could just tear a defence and put it in the top corner. You know, Firmino's his work rate's unbelievable. Mane is just, you know, it's just, he's unplayable. Sometimes Mane is unplayable. I don't know what he's going to do. I don't think the defending, I don't think sometimes Mane knows what he's going to do. It's all like, you know, he's going, isn't he? Drops the shoulder, and then if it comes off, it comes off, you know. But he's a supreme player. I mean, I was saying at the end of when we won the league, I don't think many players are getting our, you know, I don't think many of our all-time players would get in this current team. But then someone asked me on the radio station a few weeks ago to do me the all-time top 11. And at the end of the day, after a few weeks, I'd done my all-time 11 and only Van Dijk got in it. I wanted to put Mane in it. And I wanted to put Robertson in it, but I was thinking, you know, maybe in 2 or 3 years' time, if you win the league again and again, you know. So I think, I mean, I don't know if you want to know that. Do you want to know that all-time team?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
It was Clemens, Phil Neal, Alan Hansen, Virgil van Dijk, Emlyn Hughes, Souness was the holding midfield player, Gerrard on the right, even though we wouldn't want to play on the right, but Klopp would make him play on the right. John Barnes on the left, Dalglish behind, Russian Fowler. And I think, you know, it's not a bad team, is it?
No. It probably win a couple of things.
It might win something.
Yeah. It is tough. We've talked a lot actually over the pandemic in various forums about like who would make up the best 11. It is difficult. Yeah.
I mean, I wanted to get Mane in it because I just absolutely love it. And Salah, how can you leave Salah? But the reason I chose Fowler, and I told the radio station this, is because he's the most natural player I've seen. left-footed natural player before Salah. You know, but Robbie Fowler was there for a few more years. You know, and some of the goals that he scored were just sublime. You know, but obviously Salah's breaking all records, isn't he? So 1 more years, it'll be Salah. You know, could have thought.
I think so. We've had a theme going last few weeks about how undervalued he seems now to be.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, I think he is.
Yeah, just crazy. Anyone got any questions before we close out? Any other questions? That will be a no. Okay. Shouldn't have done that. I'll leave you with one question. So, what are you looking forward to the most this season, this upcoming season?
Getting back in the ground, which looked like it was going to be October, but doesn't look like it's going to be any time this year now, you know. Also, I think, you know, just to see Thiago play, you know, I think he came on last week, didn't he? And immediately, everything he did, the weight of his passes, the way he was involved in everything, he was giving me the ball. It's like, you just want to see that type of player who wants the ball in any position, even if he's got 2 or 3 men around him. Thiago will want it because he'll think he can get away from them, you know. Same as Van Dijk. And it'll be seeing Thiago play, I think, is what I'm looking forward to most. I hope Gini Wijnaldum stays. I love Gini Wijnaldum. I've always been a big fan of him. Always when people were saying, what does he do a few years ago? He's saying, well, wait until he's out the team. That's when you know what he does. You know, he's one of those cogs. He's one of those. He keeps it all going, like Ronnie Whelan used to do for Liverpool. So I hope Wijnaldum stays, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how Everton progress, because I think the top of the league now. We're only 3 games in, and they're already throwing parties. It's like. You know, I'm on a few internet groups with Evertonians in there. And one of them said last night, I can't wait for match of the day. You know, saying, Mick, it's on every week, you know. It's on every week. I think we should null and void it now. That's what the big Evertonian shout was, null and void it. No. It's not the same around fans. This season won't really count. You know, so just go back all the arguments that they've all forgotten about, you know. But I think Everton could possibly... I think they'll get in the top 6, definitely. They could possibly challenge for the top 4, I don't know, but it depends on injury. I don't think the depth of squad's there, you know. I think Liverpool's squad, we've got it in depth now. City have. I can't pass Liverpool and City again, you know. I think with Thiago, I can't see anyone beating Liverpool, you know.
I think Everton might be helped as well by the inadequacies of some of the other teams.
Yeah, I mean... It was. I think it'll be a big test. Mm-hmm. The big test will be the derby, October the 17th. I think it is.
Right. Yeah.
Last time they played us, they didn't want to come out their own half.
Yeah.
It'll be a big test for Ancelotti. Will he adopt the same tactics? Because they seem to be doing well. They've got a good midfield. It's a talented midfield, no doubt about that. Will they try and attack Liverpool? Because if they do, it could be a Leeds game, 4-3, you know. Mm. But I think Ancelotti, the way he'd set up his Napoli team, and he'll still be frightened of Liverpool. I think he will. So I think he still will go for that caution and maybe try and get us on. Be interesting to see. I'd love to see them get into our half.
Yes, yeah. I think that will make a difference how the game's played out if they decide that they're going to... Yeah.
I mean, I think it'll help. We've all been saying this. It's helped Everton because they've got no fans on the ground screaming at them.
Not being booed off at half time. So, hey, Peter, it's been a pleasure. One thing I did want to mention, based on your kind of Cantona story, was I did read, and someone, you may know this, that Thiago apparently was lined up to go to United in 2013. And Moyes came in and eventually decided that he wasn't the right player, and he signed Marouane Fellaini instead.
Yeah. I think Bolton were after him, and Wigan were after him. I think Martinez, when he was at Wigan, was after him. You know, so I think you know, he's been one of those players on the periphery because he was trying. He's basically, he couldn't get in the Barcelona team because of Xavi.
Yeah.
You know, but for me, you see him play it, and he's a combination of Alonso and Xavi. He looks like the perfect midfield player. Hopefully, you know, he stays injury free. There's no doubt to me when I've seen him play, he's an absolute superstar. And it's interesting that he's 29, isn't he? So he's not the profile that FSG you would usually go for.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Klopp said, "Look, if we want to win the league again, we need to strengthen." And that's it. I think obviously, if Klopp had really wanted Werner, he'd be here, you know. And I think looking at what he's doing at Chelsea at the moment, he hasn't hit the ground running. Not to say he's not going to do well for them, but I think how would he get into our front three? He wouldn't, would he? He wouldn't get into our front three. It might upset the balance of the team anyway. And Werner wouldn't want to be on the bench, I don't think, you know. So it's I think the signings are being very, very, very astute.
Absolutely. I mean, I think so we could go on and on, but
yeah,
the recording there.
Well, if anyone's interested in music, we haven't had any stuff out for years, you know, but we are on Spotify and we are on, I don't know if you follow the Twitter stuff, but there's a Dutch DJ, it's just remixed altogether now.
Oh, right.
Called Steph Da Campo. And he's done a house version of altogether now, you know. So it might be interesting if you're there, any of your listeners hear that, you know. Because it is a pretty, you know, housey track, you know. But you know, one can party, can they?
And of course, they can all go out and buy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a great thing, the States, Spartacus for us. I mean, the big record in the States for us was Groovy Train.
Okay.
We had a video, because Seymour signed us for Sire Records. But when they showed the video to Seymour and Sire Records, they didn't. We'd done it in a fun fair in Southport outside Liverpool with Harry Cross. He was a Brookside character from a soap opera from Liverpool. Harry Cross. He was a grumpy old man on this fun fair on this kids' train, basically. So it was a bit like tongue in cheek. And they said that won't work in America. So we did. We got a London bus painted in the Spartacus colours, and we went around Manhattan for the day with a load of people hanging out the window, and we were in Central Park and everywhere. And that became the MTV video for Groovy Train. So that did quite well. It got in the Billboard top. I think it got to number 41 and got to Modern Rock, number 1 on the Modern Rock charts, but got into the Billboard. It's different in America because it just creeps up the charts every week, doesn't it? And it got to number 41 and that. But Altogether Now was never. They did it back to front in America because Altogether Now being available in import, so that had done well in the Modern Rock chart. So they released Groovy Train as the main track, you know. Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, Brookside doesn't have much of a following here. I think that probably would have been.
You want to get onto it?
Yeah.
It's called TV.
So it was a weekly soap opera set in Liverpool back in the 80s, or when it stopped recording. Yeah. So, on that note, Brookside. Wow, that's a reference.
Check that out. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Peter, we're going to close it here. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's been a delight to have you on, chatting about such a wide variety of topics. We're going to have to listen to it back to do the write-up. So thank you.
It's okay, pleasure.
Yeah.